Welcome to the Kristina Crooks Show, where you not only get to know the many versions of moi, but also the rich tapestry of humanity. I invite you to bring your full curiosity and listen as we journey through people's stories and expertise. I hope you walk away with insights and inspiration and new possibilities bubbling up inside of your soul. The reason it's called the Kristina Crooks Show is because here's the thing. I don't always want to do the same thing. I like a variety in my life. I like to explore different rabbit holes and different people and different interests. So together in this podcast, that's exactly what we'll do. Have fun, and we'll see you soon. Today, we are here with Rebecca Cohen, a social impact entrepreneur, fulfillment coach, and founder of sharemyjourney.org, the curated peer hub and community of mutual support that connects our human experiences. Rebecca is also the founder of beoutsideandgrow.com, and author of the parenting book 15 Minutes Outside, 365 Ways to Get Out of the House and Connect with Your Kids. She also created the children's book, PJ's Backyard Adventures, which is really fun for the little ones. Rebecca has worked with over 6,000 children around the world in making outdoor connections for a healthier life. Her work has appeared in USA Today, Working Mother, Parenting, and PBS Parents. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you for having me, Kristina. Great to be here.
I'm so glad to have you here. So, for our listeners, Rebecca and I have known each other about 5 years now, and we met at a retreat in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which was, I don't know if it was for you, Rebecca, but it was such a transformational experience for me as a woman that was really about unfolding and opening and being more open to receive in so many ways. It was really a beautiful experience. And as our listeners can tell, it created some lifelong relationships. There's still a few women I speak to from that event. And it was incredible. We also started working together at that time, and Rebecca was a client of mine. For those of you that know me, I'm an ontologist and an ontological coach. And I have had this thing in me ever since I started coaching 5 years ago, which is I only want to work with people that inspire me. And Rebecca has inspired me since I met her, especially in her spiritual journey, which we'll get into, and her love of allowing nature to guide her and teach her. We had some of our conversations around what a blue heron meant, and I got the Animal Speaks book all because of you. So I still use that. In fact, just today I was visited by a dragonfly and I thought, oh, I get to meet with Rebecca today. Isn't that beautiful?
That's incredible. And I do have the Animal Speak book right there on my bookshelf. And I take it with me wherever I go. I've gifted it so many times. And it was a coach who passed, who actually just referenced when we were talking earlier, who first introduced me to that book. So there are these divine threads that really have unfolded my spiritual connection. And I think my connection to you is definitely one of those as well.
Absolutely. And it was really a primer for me for pronoia, the belief that the universe is conspiring in our favor. Because when we start looking at nature and the reflection that nature offers in its animals, in the trees, in the plants, in all of it outside, we realize that nature knows what it's doing. It
I
knows
just
what it's
sent my 18-year-old, he's doing a road trip across country, a book that was recommended to me called Braiding the Sweetgrass, about that connection to nature. And it's written by a botanist and a professor who is also an American Indian. And she talks about the science and the spirit together. Like, why do they have to be separate? That can actually be together.
I love that. Yeah, that one is in my Audible account, Braiding Sweetgrass. So maybe that's the next one.
Fantastic.
Beautiful. So tell me how beoutsideandgrow.com and the 15 Minutes Outside book, 365 Ways to Get Out of the House, and PJ's Adventures led you to having the skill set that you developed in order to create sharemyjourney.org.
So I would say that, I'm drawn to creating simple yet I call them brilliant ways, only because they were ahas for me about how to make my life more fulfilling. And so I've used my own experience really as the launching ground for so many social impact things that I've done. I mean, I worked in the corporate world for 20 years, and when my kids were young, I was running from garage to garage, hoping to not be the last person to pick up my child from daycare. And one weekend, I was in a park, just a local park, very, very small local park, with my 4-year-old, who is now 20, by the way. And he looked up at me, and there were tall trees all around us, the tallest that he had seen. And he said, "Are we in the forest, mommy?" And it was at that moment I realized that he had not had, to me, the forest is like this expanse in the wilderness and nature. And, this tiny local park had the concentration of the tallest trees he had ever seen. And his question, "Are we in the forest, mommy?" made me realize that I really wasn't living my life with intention. I just was stressed out to the max. I was crying every day before work. It was terrible. I was climbing the corporate ladder, doing what I was good at, but it was not fulfilling to me at all. And so that sort of sent me on a journey of my own that I then wrote about in 15 Minutes Outside, about how saying yes whenever my kids asked me to go outside and stopping what I was doing, because if I didn't stop, I learned that those moments were gone forever. Like that opportunity was gone. How that really not only helped my children, it brought us closer together, and it helped me. It started giving me space to pause in my life. And then 15 minutes outside leads to hours outside in a day. And initially, with the publisher, I wanted the book to be 365 days outside, a mother's journey to improve the well being of her family. And they said, no one's going to pick up that book. People want quick ideas. And so it's become an evergreen resource for teachers, caregivers, parents, about creating a lot of these ideas are so simple, but we so forget that really there's so many opportunities just beyond our doorstep to connect and
Yeah.
reflect and improve our lives in very, very simple ways. So to answer your question of how did that lead in to PJ's Backyard Adventures and Share My Journey, I think the connections that I found along the way of writing 15 Minutes Outside are just that I call them these divine threads of like that natural unfolding of what's the next logical step and the next logical step. It's like once I had the curiosity to say, how do I write a book? Then people started showing up to help me. And then it was, well, not every parent's going to pick up my book. But when I worked with children, when I started volunteering for my kids' classrooms, because they'd bring worksheets home, with a plant life cycle, and I would say, have you done that? In real life, did you plant something? And they said no. It's like, well, let me go give these children that experience. For me, my earliest memory of being outside was digging, like sitting in the dirt in my parents' garden in Illinois, eating sweet peas straight from the pod. So when we start thinking about what are those first memories of being outside, how does that connect to how do we want to live our lives now? How does it connect to the children in our lives? What experiences can I give other children that if there's one child that's impacted by planting that sweet pea, which ended up being the thing that I would teach to thousands of children, I can give them that one impactful experience that maybe they never had before. How might that impact their lives in so many ways? And so PJ was the version of 15 Minutes Outside for the little ones. And little ones would be drawn to that book because it explores different ways that kids learn. Things we try to fit in boxes, but kids, we need to nurture the little children in ourselves to say we connect to different things in different ways. We all don't have to be the same. And so that's sort of been my journey that I'm also now sharing with others that connects to Share My Journey, of really that courage to be ourselves, and that our individual experiences that we take for granted or maybe think they're just horrible experiences that we've endured, when someone else is going through that thing, like that make those connections faster so that we can help one another. So I think for me, it's an evolution of of being comfortable with sort of following the whispers in my heart. And I like to help other people now do that too.
I love that. There's so many things I love about what you just said. I'll start with what you left off on, excuse me, which was whispers. And we talked about that kind of thing a lot when we were coaching together. And what was so beautiful was I didn't realize how much it was a part of my lexicon until I met someone else who used following the whispers, my friend Glenn. And I met him on Clubhouse. And Facebook has those memories that come up. And I had said something like that the year before that. And I was like, oh, I didn't get it from there. I had already been saying it. And I had attracted this friendship into my life because that was where we were both resonating. How cool. How cool. And so with that, I'm going to take that idea of resonance and attracting. There's, the cliche statement now that your vibe attracts your tribe, but I totally agree. And when you said in the park, made a commitment to yourself, to your young son, yes, yes, and
Yeah.
how can we more embrace this more and accepted that invitation from this little youngin'. They are just I see little kids as these walking neurons that are just pure nature, just pure energy and pure just pureness because 'cause they're not affected by the stories of culture. They're not affected by the expectations of adult life that we can wrap ourselves into. They're just being. That's all they are. They're just
And
being.
I think that's what we're as we grow into adults, we have to learn that we have to unwind all of the doing to the being and the doing, and the
Yes.
intentional being and the intentional doing.
Yes, and we have to be able to have enough discernment to notice what are the things that we grew up within, what are the cultural paradigms that we grew up within that we just took on, and what are the ones we're choosing to participate in actively. And in that dynamic, it's different than a child because a child is just being, and the things that they do are just based on the beingness, which is beautiful. But as adults, we still have mortgages to pay and bills that come in and trips we want to take and things that cost money. So we have to balance this kind of more masculine energy and more mm, grounded energy on this human plane of existence than a higher framework of just being and just going with the flow. So, exactly with what you said, going through these different things you've created from the two books, PJ's Adventures and the 15 Minutes Outside, to Be Outside and Grow .com, beoutsidandgrow.com. All the links will be in the description. And now share my journey. And I've had the pleasure of being a part of a few of those community gatherings, the community circles that you hold under sharemyjourney.org. And they're just incredible. They tend to be small groups, but I really feel that you've embodied that beingness of embracing people's story, but also embracing your own inner child and that
Mhm.
spiritual lens that sets you apart from just being an entrepreneur. You have this entrepreneur which is the spiritual
Yeah.
side.
Well, and what's fascinating is, and I've done, accelerator programs for my business and like grow, 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 more, 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 more. And I've been telling people recently that I've really just had to embrace what is with Share My Journey and the beauty that is created, because every circle, it's almost like intentionally, it's like the universe like pick, and we pick each other, 6 to 8
Yes.
people who show up for this conversation. And I firmly believe that whomever comes that day is meant to meet one another. And you can't predict that. You can't prescribe that. And the most beautiful mutual support shows up in authenticity of just sharing where you really are and what's going on in your life. And we have different themes, whether it's manifesting or accountability. There's even a group specifically for caregivers, who are people who are caring for aging parents or family members. And there's that, as you said, your vibe attracts your tribe. It's each individual person waking up that day and saying, "Hmm, this would serve me today," and then those people together sort of create the magic, which is it's
And
I'm honored to witness it. I'm just a witness.
it's perfect that you bring that up because the last 2 events I came to of yours, I said that very thing. I woke up with you in my mind and I went, "Oh, it's Friday. She has circles today." Or I know there's at least 1 circle that happens on a Friday. And so I check it what it is, and I'm like, just to see the time, totally forgot what the name of it was. And at that particular time, it was so synchronistic because I wanted to share about interviewing Gay Hendricks for my podcast, the author of The Big Leap, and the topic was The Big Leap. And so it was just so synchronistic. I'm curious because I see a lot of people that come out of a corporate environment and have worked in that for a long time, that part of them can be dampened because it's not necessarily supported in a corporate environment. So how have because you worked in corporate for about 10
It
years,
feels
right?
like ever. I
Yes.
still do consulting, so absolutely.
Yeah, so you've been in and out of corporate. So how do you balance those 2 parts of yourself?
It's so interesting when I went and got my MBA early on in my corporate life, and I was specifically looking for an employer who had great tuition reimbursement. That's literally how I selected my employer. And so I worked full time, and I went to school at night for 3 years, and I got my master's in business. It was so far superior to my undergraduate experience. It's specifically selecting something that I was interested in and studying it deeply. I had never been working so much in my life, going work all day and then going to school at night and then I don't know, doing the coursework. It was weird. It lit me up in this really weird way. And my undergrad was in international relations, which I didn't realize prepares you for policy work, which was not me at all. I like to travel. Like I like to speak French. Like that really was why I was attracted to international relations, but it had nothing to do with the career it prepared me for. So when I got my first job out of college, I worked for a language services company. Um, and sort of through that experience of business said, I'm going to go get my master's in business. The interesting thing that happened to answer your question was after my MBA, or like during that process of my 3 years, my MBA, I just like this part of my brain just opened up and said, how can we use business to help people? Like that really wasn't like the focus of my education, but that's what opened up in my brain versus like this climbing the corporate ladder, da 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 da, check the box. It was, what can I do now with this yearning I have to help people, and how can I marry business with that? So it opened up a creative part of my brain that just really wouldn't stop going. And so I was just constantly just noticing things that, why are things this way in the world? Or why, you know, this doesn't make any sense at all. Like, where's the heart? Where's the heart in business? How can we magnify that more? And what's so cool about, I mean, because that was a long time ago that I got my MBA now, to now working with high school interns and a lot of them young men and talking to their business clubs at high schools and then raising their hand and saying, do you think social impact entrepreneurship will grow? Like, what do you think the future is of that? And them really wanting to lead with their hearts and say, you know what? I'm interested in business. I see what the options are. That doesn't quite resonate with me. How can I bring more of my heart into business? And so I think by listening to my heart, sort of, it's the and, it's the MBA and, it's the social impact and how can we almost like the author of Braiding Sweetgrass says, why is it science and spirit? Why can't it be business and heart? Why can't those two things exist together?
Yes, yes. And so spirit and heart in talking about that, tell me a little bit about your spiritual journey and how that has transformed over the years and how you've deepened in that.
So I would say when I started a women's entrepreneurship program in 2008, I would have ranked my spirit. I did. There was this form like rank where you are in these areas of your life. Spirituality was this big fat zero for me. Big fat zero.
Fascinating.
Zero.
Fascinating.
And so it was my first coach through that program who has since passed. Hi, Nancy. What's her name? She introduced me to, it's like, I think you would really like Well, I knew that I wanted to do yoga. Like, I just never had time for yoga. She's like, "I think you'd really like yoga and meditation." So she kind of through our work together, I started committing to learning. And I was so afraid of death when I was younger. I mean, I would have panic attacks about it, like just like the nothingness. And I had many, many conversations with my now husband of almost 22 years about death. And he's like, "Oh, that's it. Like, we're just done." And my parents are from Catholic families. They went to Catholic school. I saw my parents question the church, and I was like, well, I know they're not happy with that, but and I'm really it kind of just stopped with that. There was like just nothing there for me. And so I always say that I'm not religious, but I am spiritual. And so I think what what started happening for me was probably meeting people, meeting women like you, meeting women like Dr. Tara Trent, who had this spiritual side to them and this intuition. And I think a lot of it was just the people I interacted with who had such strong intuition. And I remember sitting at that retreat, and Dr. Trent said to me, and I don't know if there was anything that I said that made her say this to me. She's like, "You never gave yourself permission to be successful or something." And I was like, "No, I never did." And that intuition, and I think and just hearing people say, we are all born with abilities or intuitive capabilities, but we never really some people perhaps have more, but we all have the ability to cultivate these things. And I remember that there was a water ceremony at that retreat. And we blessed the water, and I think we all took a little bit to have, that night.
Yes.
And it was super bizarre. I had some of the water. It was like the purest, cleanest tasting water I have ever tasted. And then I started, and I can't remember if the vomiting part happened before or after, but at one point I had vomited like just pure black, like something, and I was like, "Whoa, that was weird." And then that night, I literally started. It's like having visions, and then the next day, things happened the next day that I had been envisioning. And so that can just that
Wow.
possibility, the realm of possibility, the realm of connection, the realm of intuition was my first introduction, I think. But besides like connecting with self, because I think a lot of that connection to spirit comes from like your connection with self. And I remember reading once like there's being lonely and there's being alone. And alone is the presence of oneself. And so if you start to listen kind of within and breath and just like seeing what shows up, I guess that openness, that was my first introduction maybe to spirit. And then the second one was after people in my life started passing, connection to those people. And maybe it didn't I don't know what the order was in which it occurred, but also at that retreat, someone sat down and said, looked at me and said, "Someone's been leaving messages for you." Or, "Who is that? Someone's been dropping things on the ground. Who is that?" And I was like, "Well, I find nails everywhere." I did. Like I always like I found nails everywhere, and I was like, I just thought I was being like a good Samaritan, like picking up nails, just taking them out of the road or out of the sidewalk so it didn't hit a tire, nobody steps on it.
Yeah, that's
Like
very
everywhere,
specific.
all the time. Very specific. It's like it's metal. Like who's leaving things for you? I was like, I don't know who it is, but I pick up nails all the time. And she's like, "Who works with metal in your family?" And I was like, "Well, my mom's dad was a welder, and she said he forgives you." And I'm like, "Forgives me for what?" She's like, "He said it's okay that you didn't go to his funeral," which was so interesting because other people have told me this. My sister met with a medium, and she said, Did you go to Grandpa's funeral?" And I was like, "I don't know. Like when I get overwhelmed, I just like suddenly like forget. Like it's
Yes.
too overwhelming." And upon reflection, she had said, like, "He came through for you, and he said it was okay that you didn't go." I'm like, "I don't remember that." So that was before. And so then it came up again with this woman looking me straight in the eyes. She said, "It's okay that you didn't go to his funeral." And upon reflection, I had been too overwhelmed by death. I had had small children. I couldn't, I was emotionally overwhelmed and anxious and I couldn't see myself showing up for the funeral. Like it was too overwhelming for me with all of these panic attacks that I had previously. I had been to someone else's funeral, like saw a dead body and like almost passed out. Like this history of not being able to handle this concept of death. And so she gave me that message. And now when I find nails, I still find nails everywhere. And I'm just like, hey, Grampy, how's it going? So I think that opened me up. It was interesting. That retreat that was so transformational for us both together and in other ways. It opened, I guess, the possibilities for my own intuitive abilities and then messages from beyond, if you will. And then the third part that I'd forgotten was when other people had passed, there was like a frequency with music, and I would get like music from them. So I'll
Oh,
stop there.
very,
I mean, I can keep going
very,
about that.
no,
It's really cool.
it's super cool because it's, I wouldn't have expected you to say that spirituality goes back as far as you can remember for you. Having a clear distinction of when that happened is really fascinating. And I remember that water ceremony. It was a really powerful water ceremony. And I didn't drink mine, but I wish you would have brought it up at the time so that we could have explored what that meant. And
Fascinating.
because
We'll
to
need
me,
to do another one.
yeah, to me, it sounds like you cleared something out, like you cleared a really old block out that had been there maybe even generations with this sacred water. And we know, but for our listeners, the water had been blessed by everyone in the group, and there was 21 of us. And the water that had been brought there to be blessed was brought from a sacred site of indigenous people in that area because one of our participants was indigenous and she had access to that. So she brought this water that was already sacred. And then we each blessed it with our intentions and our dreams. And we came back the next day and we all had different experiences from having that. The idea was to do whatever we wanted with it in the evening, but to take a little bit from this gourd that it was in and at least keep it by our side of the bed. For me, I had this triangle necklace from the Women's Live event or Emerging Women Live event in Denver. And that same necklace had gone with me over a fire walk. So it was already feeling like a very powerful necklace. And I set it in the water overnight and the next day it had a new triangle on the inside that was just fascinating. And whenever I wear that necklace, there is always someone that has been drawn to that talisman and goes, I love your necklace. And I say, it has a story. Would you like to hear it? And they go, yes, please. And they buckle in to hear all of that. And it's still there. It's faded a little, but that was such a powerful time, and it so I'm curious now for you, how do you metabolize death now?
I still have my moments when I get a little nervous. Well, it's fascinating, just even with my own family and the countless conversations I had had with my husband and tears about death and like, "That's it? That's all there is?" We were sitting in the car, my younger son, he's now 18, maybe he was in, mm, 4th grade, 3rd grade, and we were just driving back from school one day, and he goes, "You know, I think people come back after they die." And my husband goes, "You know what, Warner? I think so too." And I was like, "Wait a minute, who are you?"
The one who says they're just gone, you're just gone.
Yeah. And it's funny because his chart says that he was a spiritual leader in a past life, which is fascinating because he's not. Yeah, he's more science than spirit, but he's definitely got both.
Husband's a pediatrician, right?
No, he's an attorney.
Oh, he's an attorney, got it.
Yeah,
Different person.
working on his self actualization. Um, but where am I now with it? So I connect more. So this concept of spirit guides, I definitely with my grandfather who kept trying to come through other people and just researching around spirit guides and that we all have spirit guides and try to cultivate connecting with my spirit guides. And then experiences recently with a particular medium, and I had never met with a medium until maybe about a year ago. Um, we had a 19-year-old friend who passed. I was not particularly intending to connect with him, but he came through for his mom in this reading. And just the detail, the 4 pages of notes that I had for her, and the fact that I could call her afterwards and say, "He came through for you." The healing, I guess, that was there. And I mean, she's always felt him with her. She's had her own journey of processing his passing, but having had conversations with him that told her, he wanted to be cremated, that he believed that energy lives on after you pass. I do have this belief now that energy lives on after the physical body has passed. And so I always tell my children now, randomly, and they probably think I'm crazy. Like, well, when I pass, you can go to any tree and I will be there talking to you. So,
Oh, that's awesome.
exactly how, I have absolutely no idea, but the trust that in terms of vibration and energy and that lives on, and that we're meant when we pass on to continue to help whomever we are spirit guides for. I mean, it's super comforting for me, of course. Um, and yeah, there's just a belief there now, given different circumstances that have happened with me and different people I talk to.
And
That's
would
just
you
really beautiful.
do you think that hosting the caregiver circle that you do for sharemyjourney.org helps with that?
Oh my God. It's so interesting that you brought that up because I would not have thought to bring that up, but until I might get teary, I have been so much more comfortable with the process and the process of like dignity as we age and caring for elders and um, helping them have a peaceful transition because of that circle and those people in that circle who are sharing their wisdom with me from their experiences. That when I had a friend pass, I think it was late April, who had texted me when he was dying. Like he had said that he had had lifelong health issues. And he texted me when he decided that he wasn't going to fight anymore, that he was going to pass and pass on his own terms. Being able to talk to him like about really, and for him to share with me like what his experience is like right now, to seeing him over time, coming to visit him and being with a person who is dying and talking with him about what he wanted, like sort of honoring, right? Like honoring what he was sharing with me, what he wanted it to be like, the amount of love. It's like we connect based on love now. It's like that resonance is almost, if people allow their hearts to open, the love just magnifies. Yeah, the caregiver circle has been incredibly important in helping me be comfortable with death and dying and honoring it and honoring the individual. But I remember when I got the call to my grandmother, it's interesting. It's Grampy, who's one of my spirit guides, his wife. When I got the call that she went into hospice, I had this instinct to just go. And I was in the corporate world, and I remember going to my boss's office, just needing to ask to just leave because I had to fly to another state. And I said, I had this instinct to go, and I offered my vulnerability of, but I've never been with someone who's dying. And she said, wouldn't we all love that opportunity? And so now, like if whenever, someone I know is going through, whether it's a health issue or finds out they're dying, like I want to lean in. And I have had, um, I have to thank those people, for letting me in and for allowing me to kind of honor their process and be with them and just help that love magnify
Yeah,
and
what a
witness their
gift.
love.
What a gift, Rebecca. Because I think when we I met you right after my grandfather had passed away, and we were really close. And it's so funny to think of this right now and speak of this right now because I remember saying at that retreat when we had the water and we did the water exercise, the next day I said, I got really quiet. And my grandfather said, come home, come be in my house. And I was so like, why? I lived in California at the time. His house was in upstate New York. My family of origin lives in upstate New York. All my life and friends and other family members were in California. And I went, I don't even know where to begin of doing that move and going across country because 'cause I'd wanna take my car, so I'd have to drive, and my partner and I were really challenged at the time. We were going through we thought we were gonna be splitting up at the time, and we had this major transformation, but not at that moment. At that moment, I had just heard him come through, and it was so pivotal at that time because it was a similar thing of recognizing how being by his side when he was dying for over a 3-week period when he pretty rapidly disintegrated. And for someone who was just intellectually so brilliant and could hold a conversation on anything and he could talk to anyone and he would talk to anyone. If you walked by his house, he'd start a whole conversation with you. He'd start a conversation with people in line at the grocery store. And he never met a stranger. He just everyone was his friend and he was fine with that. It didn't mean he was inviting them to his house and hosting dinner parties, but he would talk to anyone anywhere because he loved to connect. And that was a really that was a really moving time in my life because when you're by someone's side that you care about a lot and you watch them changing right before you, and you know that they're gonna be transitioning into something else. They're not gonna be a part of this existence anymore. And putting that all together, but being with them at the same time and managing your own emotion, I'm not so sure I managed it very well, but I would manage it in private, and I would be with him during the day, and then I'd go and be sad at night and just let it move through me. And when I heard him come through at that retreat, it was, "Okay, show me what to do then." Like, I don't even know where to start. Well, now, 5 years later, I live in New York, I own his house, and we got here just in time for my uncle to be going through a very similar thing and passed away 3 months after us getting here. And I went through the same process with him, right down to how the last few days were, and I went, "Oh, this is what happens. His body is shutting down." And I could walk the family through it because I had been there with my grandfather and knew that there were certain things that happen through death and through the body letting go. And at one point, my uncle and I had had a bit of a falling out when my grandfather had passed. Everybody handles death differently, and my family is no different. And some disengaged completely. My mother had a stroke. My uncle was angry. And he was angry from some last minute things my grandfather said before he went into a full coma. And I couldn't see that at the time because my grandfather was my best friend, one of my best friends. We were super close. And I just remember being upset with my uncle for how he handled things. But here I was by his bedside as he was dying. And I had this moment, just like I did in that hotel room that night, and I said, "I have to show up with love or not show up at all." And I was showing up irritated. I was showing up not wanting to be there. I was showing up, "Can you hurry up with this process? Because I got life to live." And I didn't wanna show up that way. That's not who I am at my core. So I made a list of all the things I was grateful for the people in my family, and I started with the ones that were easy. My partner, my dad, my mom, then my grandma, and then my uncle, like to prime the pump, you know?
Sure.
And every time I tried to go back to him, I got stuck. But I went through this process where I started with the low-hanging fruit, and I started gathering up my pieces of gratitude, and I got to him, and I remembered when I was 15, we went to live with him for a month, and it was I really needed that at the time because our home life was very dysfunctional. And at this point, he was kind of in and out of consciousness. So I went and whispered this into his ear and I said, I appreciate that you were there for me when I was 15. Thank you. I don't know where I would be if you weren't there for that month of my life. I'm grateful for that." And I saw a tear come down his eye, and he blinked, so he heard me. And that was so important because then I felt this release of my own anger and my own righteousness of wanting to stand in being angry and proud of that, proud that I was standing for what I thought was love, but I wasn't. I was standing to be right and righteous and prideful. And and then we just took care of him until it was the end. And it was such an experience, but I think when we can make peace with death, which is promised for all of us, we get to really live because we recognize how very precious it is and that no day is promised and tomorrow is not promised. And as much as we like to depend on certainty, there's no promise of certainty. We don't know what tomorrow will bring, the gifts that it'll bring or the challenges that it will bring, the contrast. And I love how much you have imbued your business and your life and yourself and really incorporated the spiritual aspect into everything that you do because it it makes well, first of all, it makes me always want to share my journey. And whenever I have an opportunity to share it with someone or they're looking for circles, they're looking for community, I recommend yours because you're such a great leader. But you also understand business. And a lot of times people in the spiritual realm don't necessarily understand business. They don't understand how money works. They don't understand the concepts of business. And it can be a little frustrating in those kinds of circles because it's a lot of law of attraction, a lot of wishing and hoping and positive thinking and
You should see the
kumbaya.
conversations between me and my husband. He's even more minded, and I'm like, "Woo, well, why don't we just connect these 2?"
But you have both experiences. So how does your MBA and your personal experiences with death and your spiritual opening relate to how you lead and share my journey now?
Ooh, I love that question. A meaty one. It's a delicious one to reflect on. One of the things that I wanted to bring up as you were talking, which is probably related since my brain went there, um, was just about shifting your vibration. So we have numbers and cents. I mean, I was working on a spreadsheet this morning, um, and what troubled me is numbers and spreadsheets are not people. They're not feelings. They're not. It it drives me bonkers when I don't know if you just think of like when we think of traditional corporate, it's like sort of like anti-feeling. It's very dollars and cents. I mean, it's the people who make companies work. So when you talk about brands, it's not, I mean, yeah, brands are entities, but it's really the people that create the brand. It's their blood, sweat, and tears every day that create this thing that we so admire. So I guess to not forget that. And I've probably always been more on the people side of things of what is it that we want? And if I know I'm particularly good at doing like if I'm in a traditional role, it's like I've got boxes to check. I know exactly what I need to do. I know how I'm being rewarded. It's an opening, it's an invitation to kind of think of things in a different way and to ask yourself. I probably didn't ask myself until I was in my 30s, what do I want? And some people are like, I don't know what I want because I've just been doing what I'm supposed to be doing this whole time. And so when you were talking about shifting your vibration from anger to gratitude and just like priming the pump, like you had an intention, right? I want to show up in this way, but you knew that you weren't in that way. I mean, I think for
Right.
me, with share my journey, it's about sharing. So what you did, you just shared your journey. You shared the literal how of how you got from here to here, and it shifted your vibration. It shifted the whole experience.
Yes.
And I think if we can, we all, myself included, I mean, we feel alone. Entrepreneurs can feel like we're on an island. Somebody here the other day in this new town that I moved to, it's a small town, but people really kind of had to have a hodgepodge of things to make it work, to work in this beautiful place. So we all have our story of like, how do you make it work? And she said, we're a lot of lone eagles. And I remember reading something about like the when you're trying to do something that no one has ever done before, in theory, or it feels like no one's ever done this before, it's a very lonely place to be. And I think whether you're doing that in business or you're just trying to survive day to day, there are so many people who have who have felt in that situation before, and so many people who have these examples of like how I got from here to here. And my specific journey or path may be different from your specific journey, but just that little nugget of you sharing like the gratitude of the most basic things, of the things we can connect with, it starts
Yes.
to raise our vibration and raise our vibration and raise our vibration. And so we can all relate to being where we don't want to be, and we want to be somewhere else, and helping one another like get there. The business side is, yeah, there's a spreadsheet maybe to like, what does that look like? And I think the hardest part of being a social impact entrepreneur is I'm driven by impact. I'm not driven by the money. So plenty of people have told me you should be a nonprofit. And I'm like, well, why do I need to be a nonprofit? Then I'm asking people for money so that I can do the same. Like, why not have a business model that supports the good thing that's happening? So that's the nut to crack. Everyone in business or everyone who has an idea or anyone who wants something to be sustainable just wants to make it work. And how do I make it work? For me, if there's impact, then I need to just keep going. And so that's the biggest part, kind of marrying the business with the spiritual, and then also connect, or at least open myself up in meditation, asking a question and seeing what shows up. Or and sometimes it's asking. Sometimes we think we need to have answers right away, but just
Yes.
like asking, knowing that it's the question. You could put it on your desk. The question could be there for 6 months, or you could open yourself up and the answer could come like in 10 minutes. But just being open to like the trusting of that if that question aligns with you, whether it's what am I supposed to do next, or how do I make this work, or how how can I serve? Plenty of times I've just asked that question, how can I serve? And in those moments of quiet, whatever those answers show up, it's not like the answers show up all the time for me, but I still do remember like key moments when like these words appeared. And then I'm just like, I just need to keep going. I need to not give up. Just keep going. Because we've all heard of like the 10-year overnight success or the 20-year overnight success
Right.
PR and everything show what's successful or whatever that definition of. It's like you have to find what's important to you and stay connected to that because I mean I'm guilty of it. I'm constantly like, but I could do that or I could do that or this pays more or but it's what is truly important to you. There are plenty of people who've had successful businesses without having a background in business. So, and with the internet, you
That's
can
true.
find anything. And of course, with Share My Journey, you can always find somebody who can just talk to you. One conversation can be so impactful, just like this for us today. Who knows, like what will transpire already? Our conversation is woven in this divine thread and gone places that I didn't expect it to that have really connected me with my heart. So thank you, Christina.
Oh, you're welcome. Me too. Same for all of that. And with everything you just shared, there's so many threads we could pull out, right? And go down those rabbit holes. But I do want to connect the piece about death because I think when we get comfortable with dealing with death, which is a natural part of life, birth and death. And I think as human beings, especially in American culture, we have this propensity to be in denial of death, to ignore death, to not want to look at death, to not want to see death, to not want to be with death. And it's really not wanting to be with discomfort. We've gotten to a place where we just want to be comfortable all the time. And there's there's a downside to that because then you're not agile enough to move through those times in your life when things get challenging, when you lose someone you love or someone transitions that you're close to. Prefer to say it that way rather than lose them because I, like you, feel like they're here, that you can call on your ancestors, that you can call on your people. You could feel what they felt like when they were alive. You can feel their presence. And when we're at ease with that, and recognize it's a natural part of life, it transfers into other parts of our life. It transfers into our business, into our relationships with our kids, into our relationship with ourselves, into our ability to let go of things that are no longer working in order to make space for something else to bloom and grow. And and all that with being able to metabolize death. So I think it's really cool that you shared that piece of your journey and through running the business, and that you have the caregiver circle and you're able to sit in that, because it's such a gift to be in that space of discomfort for you and your life, but also for anyone else that you engage with. And I can't encourage people enough to have an experience like that at least once in your life, where you're with someone that's transitioning, because seeing that, being with that, and having compassion for that will change your perspective on what it means to live.
It's interesting. My mom met with the medium I mentioned, the woman who grew up going to Catholic school, considers herself Catholic. She met with a medium. And I appreciate that she shared with me, they talked a lot about death. My mom's 76 and she's getting older, and her desire is to be as strong as she can and to live as long as she can, a healthy life and a vibrant life, and to live, as you said. And so she shared with me, and she actually thought about maybe having that we should have a family like meeting with this medium about this perspective of death is just another transition. And that really helped my mom's perspective. So thank you for using this word transition, because I believe that that's what it is. And that thinking about it that way really, really helped my mother.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So 2 last questions, Rebecca. One, well, I'll start with one and then I'll throw the second one at you once we're done with the first one. What are your self-care practices that are really near and dear to you that can almost always transmute your energy back to a state of balance, back to presence, back to groundedness, and also creativity, but back to a place that you are open to receive?
Mm, I love that because it is a practice for me. I think it's a daily practice for me because I have suffered my whole life from anxiety, and I probably didn't know that until I don't know, now when I was turning 50 this year, that like, oh, there wasn't anything wrong with me. I just suffered from anxiety. I was an anxious person in my 20s. I had an anvil on my chest. So in my 30s, I discovered yoga and meditation. And right now, and also because I'm turning 50 this year, for the last 3 years, I've had hormonal changes where my anxiety would spike. So the yoga, the meditation, the time in nature. So for me, that's the trifecta for me, the yoga, meditation, time in nature. And that can be like a walk around the block. It doesn't have to be daily walk around the block. Like if there's one thing for certain, I take a walk outside, and it can be 15 minutes or it can be longer depending on how much time I have. But that no longer worked for me, just those three things in the last 3 years, which is really disturbing to me because I felt like it felt like that is bad. So I meditate every morning. Actually, when my eyes open, I stick in a meditation. I use Insight Timer. It's free. Thank you, Insight Timer. And all of the teachers who are on there, because my monkey mind will take over. It's just the way I'm wired. So if I open my eyes, stick in a meditation, I at least have 20 minutes of space so that I'm sort of entering the physical plane from sleep in a more grounded place than worrying about all the things that I need to do. So morning meditation for me, daily time outside. It doesn't have to be long. Just that I love listening to the birds. I love, it's super exciting. We have hummingbird feeders here now. I mean, I've been waiting like a decade to come back to where I live just so I can have hummingbird feeders because I'm just constantly fascinated. I feel like a little child. So even a bird feeder, that can be your connection with nature. Like I'm watching a deer eat this morning and I'm just so fascinated. So I think finding that thing that is like a spark, it just lights up your creativity. And for me, that sort of connects with my inner child in a joyful way, not in the fearful way that I think or at least I've carried with me for a long time. And then the meditation, daily walk outside, some sort of like physical. So weight training for me, actually, as I've gotten older, has been kind of a key for me. That really wasn't in my realm of self-care before. Oh, and since I moved, I didn't have a bathtub for 6 years. I take a nightly bath. I feel like a child again. I take a nightly bath with this it's a soothe and sleep lavender bubble bath that's like Epsom
Ooh.
salt, and so it takes out the soreness in my muscles, and I just melt into my bed.
Oh, that is amazing. That sounds delicious.
It's delicious. I
You
would
know,
recommend it.
as you were sharing those, I love those. I love the lavender bath. I have another friend that does a nightly bath. Like, she makes sure she is done with work at 3 p.m. and her phone goes off by 5 p.m. and she goes to bed really early because she gets up like in the middle of the night. So she goes to bed like 7 or 8. And for those last 2 hours, it's just total self-care while she prepares for bed. And I think when we can get into a rhythm that works for us, it's amazing. It's amazing what it does for your mental health and the wealth you bring into your life, the abundance that you bring into your life, the gratitude that you have, and your state of being, because you're keeping an even keel. And you were mentioning listening to the birds outside. I love sitting in my backyard and hearing the birds, hearing the cardinals and the blue jays, even though they're a little squawky. And then this morning, I saw a dragonfly, a black and white dragonfly that was just beautiful and almost landed on me and is a representation of transformation. So I think I said it before we even got on, but it was a beautiful experience. So my last question, we tend to have a lot of creatives and entrepreneurs or creative entrepreneurs that listen to this. So, what advice would you give them about building a life that is conscious, a business that is conscious, and a relationship that's conscious, or relationships?
Continue to stay true to yourself. It's a practice that I have my patterns. I've lived on this planet long enough now where I'm like, oh, that wasn't an overnight like shift in my way of being. Like this is something that I have to practice over and over again. So it's continually coming back to your conditions of satisfaction, which is a Christina Crooks thing that I just redid it together, and I made my husband do it. I have my list, he has his list. But I said, we need to figure out a way that it's an and. It's a this and it's a that and it's a together because we want to be together and we both at the end of the day want to be happy. But I have my things that I need to do for me, and you have things that you need to do for you. So it's like it's coming back to center. What do I want? And it's the same thing the media message. It's like, Rebecca, just what do you want? As soon as you can land on what you want, the rest is going to start falling into place for you. So it's when I get distracted like by things externally to what I want, that's when I go on this roller coaster ride. My lord, it's like I call it wrestling with a crocodile. I forget like this. But if I just come back to my conditions of satisfaction and say, does this really resonate with me? That's when the magic happens. I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs too, where we're worried. We're worried. How are we going to make this happen? How are we going to make this happen? That is not the energy of manifestation. We know that. We know that. So it's like,
Yes.
how do I get from here? Like, what's my practice today? It could be different tomorrow, but what's my practice to get from here to my vibration being here? And it's so and having compassion. So aligning back with what you want, but also having compassion with yourself when it's not exactly aligned. Like we can't to let go, we can't always control. So I know that's a bit spiritual than
No, it was
business oriented, but I think when, for things to naturally unfold, we have to let go and trust, which is a vibrational thing, but it begins with alignment, as you know.
yes. I had a whisper recently. I love that advice. It's beautiful advice. And I had a whisper recently that is in alignment with what you just said. And it was for every new decision I'm making going forward, I ask myself, does this feel expansive? Like I want to lean into this? Or does it feel contractive, like something else I need to do? And with that question, it helps me to calibrate what things I want to take on and what things I don't. Would you agree that that's a
Oh yeah, and
Abs-
yes, it's a wonderful way to simply put it in a practice that we can all have. Does this feel expansive?
yeah. Yeah, it's been very helpful for me. It was so beautiful to be with you, Rebecca. Beautiful to have you a part of this. And for our listeners, if any of you would like to experience what the conditions of satisfaction are that Rebecca referenced, just send me an email. It's kcrooks@empoweredhuman.com, or you can find me on any of the social media. So you can send me a message on any of the places or an email, and I'm happy to set up a call with you and we can walk you through what your conditions of satisfaction are. I love that that's one of your practices still, Rebecca. It's amazing. Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners or anything you'd like to close on?
No, I just your stories, what you have experienced in your life, your lived experiences can be invaluable to someone else. Sometimes we think that we're alone with what we're going through. And just like we talked about in death, like kind of that leaning in, it magnifies that love. And so like leaning in to your story and just whether it's offering it to someone else or just being open to sharing it when it comes up or reaching out. When you'd like to hear someone else's story, there's always a place for you. So thank you, Christina, for having me today to talk about my journey and share my journey.
Oh, well, thank you for being here with me, Rebecca. And for those of you listening, if you would like to be part of a community that Rebecca runs, you can find her website at sharemyjourney.org. I know I've mentioned it several times, but her circles are amazing. It will all be in the show description. Go and have a great day. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Kristina Crooks Show. If you'd like to learn more about our guest, you can explore the show notes, and there should be information about them in there. If you'd like to reach out to me personally, you can go to my website, kristinacrooks.com, and learn about different offerings we currently have, or set up a call with me personally. I hope that you take away some insights and some new inspirations, some new zest for life. And I hope, above all, you have a really great day.